What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out. EMT here, and in this video we are taking out for a spin this bad boy, the brand new Sandmarc Motion Pro variable ND filter. Let's go. We've been using Sandmarc lenses and filters for a while, actually pretty much since the channel started, so to speak. We've been using their filters because they make filters for smartphones as well as SLR cameras. If you have not checked any of the previous filter videos or Sandmarc lens videos, check out the link in the description or the annotation, and consider subscribing if you enjoy this video. Now, not too long ago, I actually had the opportunity to take out for a spin the motion variable filter for smartphones. And that is actually one of my favorite filters because it combines multiple levels of ND. It's pretty much like having 2 to 3 filters combined in one, and now they've actually translated that into SLRs, and this thing is beautiful. The Sandmarc Motion Pro variable ND filter starts at $129, and it can go all the way up to $159 depending on your thread size. I am currently using the Canon EOS R with a 15 to 35 millimeter RF lens, and this one is the biggest, 82 millimeters, but depending on your lens, you might be able to get away with a smaller one. It's made out of industrial grade aluminum and very thin compared to other filters out there. Now, traditionally you find separate lenses with different neutral densities, and while these are fantastic, sometimes less is more. Sometimes I just want the one thing to carry to get the job done, and that's when the Motion Pro variable filter comes in. The Motion Pro variable ND filter virtually combines all those filters into one that you can simply adjust. By simply adjusting the ring, we can go from ND8 all the way up to ND64. Now, this is the Motion Pro variable ND filter, and you can actually see my nose through this filter because we're at the lowest neutral density, but if we just simply adjust, you can start seeing how things are getting a little darker and darker and darker. In a sense, this filter is like sunglasses for your camera. And the reason we do this is so we can control the shutter speed on super bright environments. And it allows you to capture some awesome long exposure shots even during the daytime. Here are a couple of examples of images that I took with the Sandmarc Motion Pro variable filter in broad daylight, and I was able to slow down my shutter speed all the way down to 1/10 of a second in order to capture a little bit of motion blur for the splash of waves. We also shot a couple of video clips in order to illustrate the difference between shooting with the 180-degree shutter rule, right, that cinematic shutter speed, versus shooting with no filter, not following the 180-degree shutter rule, just so you can see the difference not only in the motion blur, but also on the color and the contrast. You might be wondering, why would I want motion blur in my videos or in my photos? Well, this leads to the 180-degree shutter rule. Just to make things super simple, the 180-degree shutter rule allows us to achieve cinematic motion blur, similar to what the human eye sees every day as far as motion blur goes. Somebody running, the spinning of a wheel, water, things like that. And basically the whole idea is to set your shutter speed to double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be anywhere in between 48 and 50 in order to achieve that cinematic motion blur. If you are filming at 60 frames per second, then your shutter speed should be 120, around that neighborhood, once again in order to achieve that natural motion blur.
Now, this is a quick example of being able to achieve cinematic shutter speeds without any filters, like the Sandmarc Motion Variable Pro ND filter, but that required me to crank up my aperture to f16 instead of 2.8. So notice the depth of field right now is definitely not the same as the previous shot. The color, saturation, and contrast, the warmth is definitely a little bit more neutral for this time of day. So I'm shooting at 1/50th of a second, but we compromised on the aperture. Right now we're shooting at f16 and 100 ISO.
Now, there have been a lot of instances in which I wanted to switch filters in order to accommodate the right shutter speed in an environment that's super bright, but in the heat of the moment I wasn't able to capture and I had to crank my shutter speed in order to be able to pretty much expose my subject properly or play with the aperture. And that's the difference between something looking a little bit more professional than something looking a little bit more amateur. And that's when the Sandmarc Motion Pro variable filter comes in clutch, because it's only one filter and you can just simply adjust it based on the conditions and the environment. If suddenly you change locations within the same environment and things get darker, or there's a cloud that comes over, you can just simply adjust your neutral density to the appropriate levels, and you have to start switching lenses and things like that. Now, after everything is said and done, I am very, very impressed with the quality that I'm getting with the Sandmarc Motion Variable filter. It is a high quality filter and it allows me to achieve the desired shutter speeds. And maybe I don't need to slow down my shutter speed all the way down to a long exposure shutter speed, but maybe I just want to add a hint of warmth and contrast to my shots in camera without having to edit all the time. My editing has definitely been improved because I'm already getting some of the warmth and tones of color and contrast that I like, so I don't have to crank that up anymore. It's just smaller tweaks here and there in Lightroom. And because I've already been familiarized with this filter, using it on my smartphones with the Sandmarc lenses, switching back and forth between SLR and my smartphone is just easy. One thing I wish was a little different was the placement of the main label, or pretty much all the labels in general, because they actually turn out to be at the bottom of the camera. Sometimes when I'm taking a picture, I just want to look over and see and make sure that I'm in the right neutral density. It's a little difficult because it ends up being at the bottom of my lens, but it might be a little bit different for you. Maybe in the future they can actually add just different kind of like resistance, or maybe like a clicking feeling when you're switching between neutral densities. That way you know when's the last one and where's the middle one, right? That's kind of like a little feedback there that I would recommend for future iterations. But other than that, I have nothing else to say about the Sandmarc Motion Pro Variable ND filter. This is forever in my camera bag. It's one of my favorite filters to carry. If the environment dictates, I just pop it in and it's a one and done, so to speak. So yeah, there you have it, Sandmarc Motion Pro Variable ND filter. Link is in the description, and Sandmarc has provided a promo code so you can save some money, but I want to know what you think. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you have any questions or suggestions, drop them down there so we can continue to create relevant content for you. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and a sub. And as always, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I'll catch you on the next one.